Yes, that's the right one.
Ready. Standing by.
Five, four, three, two, one. You are live, you are live.
Welcome to this evening's sunset safari, and I don't think we're going to get much of a pretty sunset this evening. It is very windy and chilly. You can see the impalas already ruffled up against the cold, and it's not going to be a good night if you are an impala or a kudu or anything that might be eaten by lions. My name is Brent Smith. I have Jandre, aka the Pusfoot Gadding. We've now let him out of his cage. He's allowed on game drive. He's very excited. So there's a lot of camera wobbles today. It's not me moving, it's Jandre just being very excited about being off the computer and not doing admin and getting out into the bush to film some animals. So I was saying it's not going to be a good night if you're a prey species. Cloud cover coming in, it's going to be dark, there's a howling gale for us in the bush and very cold, so a really good night if you're a predator to hunt. And you can see most of the animal species we're going to see are going to be quite nervous and jumpy. Because of this weather, they're going to be keeping a sharp lookout. A herd of impala like this is going to start looking for an open area quite early this evening, where they're going to lie up and try lie up in an area as open as possible so they can see any potential threats as they make their way. This is one of the bigger groups of impala we have here on Djuma. This particular herd meanders from Sydney's Waterhole through Sandy Patch all the way to Impala Plains, sticking to the sort of seep lines where there's still a little bit of good grass left, but also feeding on all the different tree species as they move through. Now that's what makes impalas so incredible, their adaptability. That is why they're the most numerous antelope in Africa. Not only can they eat grass, they can also eat leaves. They occur through such a wide range of habitat, from grassland to woodland to relatively thick woodland as well for an antelope species or a herd antelope species. And you can see how they're all red and puffy. So what they've done is they've extended they've pulled their hair follicles tight, and what happens there is an insulative layer of warm air will get trapped between their body and their skin, making them feel a little bit warmer. But as you can see, they're not looking to be the happiest in this weather. Always on alert. Well, we're going to leave the graceful impala and continue on. So a few updates from this morning. The wonderful ladies of the Nkahuma Pride, plus a couple of Birmingham males, are still to the west of us. And they had a waterbuck kill there. We were hoping they were going to come east last night. They didn't. So I'm just going to have a quick squiz around the far northwestern corner of Djuma. There's a possibility of this cool windy weather. They might have moved during the day. Also, we think Tingana is around the Buffelshoek Waterhole area and tracked them into that area. I know Jamie's heading up to that part of the world to look for them. Now, Jamie and Veerma are out on the other vehicle, and we have, of course, Commander Bond and Gerard sitting in James's little kingdom in the middle of quarantine. So speaking about the king and his kingdom, let's go see what's happening in the tent.
Hello everybody. We are just organising things in the tent here. My name is James Henry and I am in the what is termed the safari tent, aka my office, which is not too bad. You can see my view stretching out wide over the quarantine clearings, and behind my museum a rack of artifacts which is shortly to grow. We're going to get a few more artifacts on Monday. Now on camera today is the not insubstantial form of Gert. Good afternoon. Hello. Yes, very nice to have you with us. And all of you, we are just as live as Brent is on the other vehicle, and of course Jamie on her car. Which means that even though we are in the tent, you may and should and indeed are encouraged to answer questions or ask questions. Sorry, you don't have to answer anything you don't want to. Hashtag Safari Live is the Twitter handle on which you should send through your questions. Now what I wanted to show you here was this impala skull. Now, of course, you were looking at the impala with Brent Leo Smith, and I just think that these are quite a little slightly macabre, I suppose. Let's just do a little twist around here, and then I'll show you. Well, firstly, I want to show you his brain case. Now, that on your screen looks pretty big. It isn't. It's the size of about a plum. A sort of smallish plum is the size of an impala's brain. So not very large, but it's enough for the impala to live in. We had a number of questions today about intelligence and the natural selection for intelligence. That brain is perfectly big enough for, as Brent says, one of the most numerous antelope in Africa. So you don't need a big brain to survive necessarily. And what I wanted to show you here was the teeth. And what we're going to do, I seem to have lost one of the teeth, but I'm going to find it again. I have lost one of the teeth. I've dropped it. Anyway, those are the teeth, and what we can do is actually look at them under a microscope, believe it or not. And I'm going to put the microscope over the tooth, and Gert is going to just get in on the feed there. And we'll just zoom. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? That's the enamel that you can see that's a little bit pockmarked there. And if we move along, just inside there, that dark bit where there's a cavity, is where the dentine of the tooth is. There we go. And that dentine, of course, and the enamel will wear away as the impala chews away. And it, of course, will keep chewing and chewing and chewing, rubbing these teeth over each other. And you can see how the ridges have been formed as the impala has had to feed and feed and feed on endless amounts of grass. And, of course, what goes in one end must normally come out the other. And the other thing we have to show you here, of course, is a piece of impala dung. So here it is. Here's the actual dung in my hand. It's very dry, and indeed some of it seems to have been borne into by something. You can see a couple of holes. There we go. There's a hole in that one. I don't know what's living in there. And then if we go back to the microscope, let's see if I can get you a focused picture before we go across to it. There we go. Just have a look there. Let me try and focus it properly. There we go. And what you have in there is a whole lot of grass. You can see, you might also be able to see little bits of leaves in there. And as Brent said, impala are mixed feeders, which means they can eat grass or leaves, but they're incredibly efficient digesters. And you can see how very, very finely chewed all of the pieces in this dung are. And the reason they're so finely chewed, of course, is because the impala is a ruminant. So it re-chews its food, it swallows the food for the first time, it goes into the first chamber of the stomach, it regurgitates it, and then with these very sharpish, well, they're not sharp, but they're sharply edged and ridged teeth, it grinds and grinds and grinds away, swallows them into the second stomach, into the third and fourth stomach after that, and then out as this very dry dung, that has reabsorbed most of the water that was in the food, and so they're incredibly successful at being around this particular area. Now, I'm not sure exactly where we're going, but I am sort of seeing a lion. It's very exciting. I think you're going to see a lion fairly soon. Good. Excellent. There is a lion, and Jamie's going to talk to you about it.
And a very good afternoon to you, and welcome to a repeat performance of VM and Jamie Go on a Sunset Safari. Because it seems as though whenever we drive along Gallagher shortcut, we find lions. In this case, it was the spotting of VM that happened to highlight them or bring them to our attention. They've kind of put themselves in a rather precarious spot, but nevertheless, safari. I'd love to know where these two have been hiding all the time. We know that we knew that one of the Nkuma females was mating with one of the males. It seems as though the couple find themselves somewhat tired of each other's company and just tired in general, really. I thought about playing them some Marvin Gaye, but it seems as though not much will stir the sleeping lions for now. Now, unfortunately, our signal is incredibly shaky. As you may or may not have noticed, I am captaining what has been given a series of names, so the name is not yet set upon, but I'm captaining the Titanic, also known as the boat, this afternoon, which is our makeshift Mahindra, which means that we can't really get ourselves into the more comfortable of positions here. We find ourselves somewhat precariously perched on a drainage line. So what we're going to do, because the signal's a bit shaky, is we are actually going to bring Brent into the sighting so that he can take over and then we can carry on. And I happen to have Herbert on the back as well, so we're going to go and search and see if we can't find Tingana for you, the dominant male bird of this area. What a fantastic way to start off our sunset safari. It seems to be me and VMT. As long as we drive down this road, we'll find lions there. It seems to be the way it works. Quite happily lying up, enjoying the shade. We for signal. I'm going to send you back to James and guide Brent into the sighting.
We're back. Brent is going into the sighting. I will be able to tell when he's there, of course. I was slightly not expecting that, so let's have a look. I'll tell you what, appropriately at a lion skull. Now, I know that many of you have seen this before, but for those of you who haven't, let's have a look-see. And let's have a little focus. We'll have a theme today on brain size. So there, inside this particular piece of bone, and if I'm not mistaken, that's called the parietal bone there at the back, is the lion's brain. And the lion's brain, despite the fact that it is probably twice the size of the impala, where's my impala gone? There it is about the same size as this impala's brain. Its skull is much thicker, and that's because it lives a life that is particularly more, I guess, more physical. It's also just a more massive animal. But its brain is roughly the same size as this impala's, despite the fact that the skull is so much larger. And I find that amazing, and I'll tell you why I find it amazing. I find it amazing because lions are supposed to be sophisticated social hunters. And one of the big things about why our brains are so big, and why all primate brains are so big, is that we are social. And our social interactions are supposed to have selected or been the selective pressure that made our brains so very big. Now, lions are cooperative hunters. They hunt in a team, sort of. It looks like teamwork when they're hunting. How they do that, we don't know. It's almost entirely, we think, instinctual, because there's not a huge amount of learning that a brain this size is able to do. A lot of what the lion does is packed into its instincts, which are also housed in the brain, of course, but there's not a great deal of flexibility of learning compared with something like a human being within the brain of an animal like this. And I always find that quite interesting. Now, on the other end of the scale, or not to the other end of the scale, but similarly, if we look at this hyena here, whose brain case has been broken open. Now, I don't think that this is a particularly adult, this is an adult hyena, but I don't know, well, I don't know. Probably quite old. This is a big male lion, of course, so let's just look at them together. We'll put them at different sides there. I actually think this was an adult hyena. In fact, it was definitely an adult hyena, and probably quite an old one. And if you look at its teeth, you can see the teeth are blunt. Now, of course, if you've been eating bones your whole life and you've been macerating bones and chewing on them, so your teeth will be incredibly blunt by the time you get old. And a hyena lives in an extremely socially complex environment, and to the extent that they're often compared with the cercopithecine primates, so the baboons and the vervet monkeys, in terms of the complexity of their social situations. Now that again is a predicator of intelligence, but in this case intelligence doesn't seem to be predicated by the size of the brain. The size of this hyena's brain is roughly the same size as this impala's brain. So about plum sized, which I think is amazing. I think it's astonishing. So much, I guess, of what the brain does is decided by how it's wired as opposed to its size. Now, let me put this back, and let's have another look at a tooth. Ooh! Hello, Gracie, aged 8. You want to know if your brain is like a lion's or a hippo's. Gracie, your brain, if this is the size, so this is, here we go, this is roughly the size of an impala's brain, right? We get our impala back here. You can put that almost in there exactly. There you go. That's the size, that's Strychnos madagascarensis, and that's about the size of an impala's brain. Okay. Your brain, Gracie, here it is. Your brain's about that big. So your brain, compared with all of the animals I've just shown you, a lion and a leopard and a hyena and an impala, your brain is much, much, much bigger. And as a human being, your brain is the biggest brain that there is in the world. No other animal has a brain as big as a human being. I'm not sure how big your brain is compared with other human beings, Gracie, but I suspect, given the quality of the questions that you ask, it's probably even bigger than this also Strychnos madagascarensis fruit. A hippo has a tiny brain. A hippo's brain, even though the hippo is so very big, a hippo's brain is probably not much bigger than this. And I heard the other day that even a horse's brain, I'm sure you've seen a horse, a big horse has a brain this big. And I've ridden horses, you know, Gracie, and Gracie, I don't think horses are very clever. We're not going to say that to horsey people. All right, what else can I show you about lions? Just before you go back to lions, let's see if we can have a look at the claws. Here's a lion claw, which I think is quite an impressive artifact. And let's see if we can't pop this under the microscope and see what that looks like. Right, oh dear, computer switched itself off. No, there we go, we're okay. Brilliant. So there, everybody, is the edge of the lion's claw. And I don't suppose that's the most fascinating picture you've ever seen in your life, but it does give you an idea of the kind of nail that the impala has, at least the lion. And there, quite interestingly, is the skin and the hair. Isn't that amazing? Those are the thick hair. They look thick, don't they? But those are quite thin hairs sticking out between the skin and the sheath of the claw. Wonderful. Now, if we look at this again at sort of a higher resolution, not higher resolution, it's a lower zoom, if you like. This is the sheath. Okay. Now we know that a lion is able, just like your house cat, is able to stick its claw out. They've got what we call, many people will say, a retractable claws, that cats have got retractable claws. They don't have retractable claws, everyone. They've got what we call protractable claws. Now what that means is that when a lion is resting, there's a very special muscle inside here. And when it's resting, in the same way that when your muscles are resting, they're relaxed, this claw is inside the sheath. This one is, of course, long dead, so it doesn't move anymore. But when they are trying to run, or when they're trying to murder something, kill them, they push them out. They push that muscle out, and the claw comes out, and then they use it for killing. And that is a phenomenal claw. I mean, look at the size of it. It's almost the same size as half of my finger. Isn't that amazing? I think that's absolutely unbelievable. Right, let's see what else we can show you. Rebecca's putting me sorely to the test here, but we'll have a good go. Right, the other thing I have to show you right now is a crocodile tooth. There is a crocodile tooth, and very similar. Now, I know I'm kind of going all over topic here, but what is interesting is that even though this is a reptile, which is millions of years distant from the way, or from us, millions of years distant from the human being in terms of evolution, the tooth is exactly the same. And when we look at the structure of how things are built, what I want you to have a look at here, and we've kind of done this before, but let's do it again anyway. Here we have the two completely different animals, one a tortoise and one a lion. And the way in which they grow, in the way in which the bone of this tortoise shell and the bone of this lion's skull grow, are very similar. And what I mean by that is that they are made of small sections. So each of these things is made of a small section. And you can see here, the small sections grow independently from each other, and although they're fused, they're not quite solid. So that means that this complicated shape that is the tortoise's shell is able to grow. Because if this was one piece, it would be almost impossible for it to just grow outwards. It would have to have these little pieces, and it's the same with your skull and with every other mammal skull. And if you look carefully, we tend to just talk about the skull, but the skull is actually made up of a whole lot of different bones. Now, I'm going to attempt to remember them all, but I think I'm probably going to forget. This one I like here. You see this bone here, and you can see it's marked off there and there. That is called the lacrimal bone. And lacrimal, I always remember it from when I was a singer at one stage, it means tear. That's where you tear. Lacrimosa means to cry. And lacrimal is the sort of tear, the teary one. And then we have the zygomatic arch. And in the front here, that's an easy one to remember. Well, it's not, this one isn't particularly. That's called the maxilla. And the maxilla goes down to this enormous, vicious tooth. And while we're looking at that vicious tooth, let's actually go and look at one in the flesh with Brent Leo Smith.
Well, we have to thank Jamie and Virm for this lion sighting. Unfortunately, their vehicle doesn't have the greatest signal here, but we do. And there's one of the Birmingham boys. Unfortunately, they're not in the best spot where we can see both of them at the same time. And there's an Nkuma lioness lying just off to the left. There she is. And I can hear some elephants not too far away as well. Now, this is a mating pair. So hopefully we will get some action shortly. They were seen mating on Sibambili this morning. So they've crossed during this cool, windy day. And they're probably one of the only animals that's really enjoying this weather. So on average, big cats, when they're mating, depending on how far it is into the cycle, will mate once every 15 minutes for 3 or 4 days. Of course, 15 minutes is an average, not an exact. So it can change, can be shorter, can be longer. He does look quite content there. Wind keeping the biting flies at bay. Nice cool weather. Now, with the amount of mating the Birminghams are doing with all the different lionesses and the amount of cubs about, they have definitely now proclaimed their domain, so to speak. Not to say all the cubs are theirs. I'm just going to roll slightly back for you, Jean-André. Oh, there we go. So it's not necessarily that all the cubs will belong to the Birmingham boys. The females do often mate with nomadic males, and those nomadic males don't form part of coalitions, and they sort of sneak around the peripheries and other places like that. And their strategy in passing on their genetic line is never to be involved in a coalition and never to hold a pride for themselves or flop. And they're adept at avoiding these coalition males. Now we're going to have to go forward again. So these males are adept at avoiding coalition males. And they can cover vast distances. They don't have a set home range or a set territory. And in certain parts of Africa, and there hasn't been enough research done on the genetics of lions in this area to know for sure. But in other parts of Africa where they've studied this extensively, I mean, up to 48% of the cubs born to a pride are not from the pride males. Even though the pride males accept them as their own, they are unable to sniff genetics, which is quite lucky for those nomadic males, enables them to pass on their genetic code. I thought young Junior might become one of those, but apparently he's got a friend now. So that could be quite exciting to see how that coalition develops. It's unlikely that the two of them will spend too much time here, even if they do, might be passing through. They really don't want to rumble with the Birmingham boys. See how nicely the mane is darkening? Now, the darker the mane, the higher the testosterone level in lions. There's been some very interesting studies done on that. I'm going to try and sneak around a bit, see if we can get a better view from a bit further forward. How's it looking, Jean-Ray? Not great. I'm going to fiddle around here a bit, see if we can get into a nice spot to see the lions. While we do that, let's go see what Jamie's up to.
It's a relatively tricky spot, that, to go and try and find a nice spot to pop himself. Distraction. Sorry. I got distracted by leopard tracks that are from last night, I would say, right, Herbert? Last night, yeah. So this is Tingana, wandering straight towards Buffelshoek Dam, and that's where we're going to go and search for him and see if we can't find him. That is our plan for the afternoon, and luckily for me, I have Herbert with me so that he can help us out. It's miserable weather out here on Djuma. The wind is howling, it's freezing cold, but it was expected. We did know that there was a horrible cold front on its way from Cape Town. Luckily we've got those lions, because on a day like today, everything likes to hide away and stay hidden. And this morning when I was tracking a female leopard, I don't know which one it was, on Cheetah Plains, got to the point where her tracks disappeared into a really thick bunch of monkey orange trees. And I took a couple of steps in there and I couldn't hear anything. I knew that the animals around me couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. And I decided that in that case, discretion is the better part of valor. I did carry on for a little bit, but it was very slow going to try and track in this weather in dense vegetation. All of the animals are so unsettled by this wind. And Tom, you're wondering if it is raining or if it's just wind. It is just the wind, Tom.
Tent. So we're just trying to reposition. You've caught us in a strange spot, sort of halfway up, but I'm trying to drive very carefully so I don't damage our VR rig as well. And I think we've managed to get through the little gap. Hey, but there we go. Hello, big boy. Is that tired kitty? Now, the interesting thing about mating big cats is there's a few different strategies between the species. And Kathy Ward in Tennessee is wondering who initiates the mating process. Well, Kathy, with lions, initially the female initiates, and then it comes a bit blurry, and then either can initiate, but normally the first approach, etc., will be made by the female. The males will, once they get on the track of a female and estrus, the males will follow that quite extensively. Would you like me to go forward a skosh, Andre? So once the male's sort of got a whiff of a female who is an estrus, let's see if we can get both of them. There we go. Oh, back slightly. There we go. But now once the sort of mating's taken over, the male sort of initiates. Every time she gets up and moves, he'll follow her and look for an opportunity to mount her. Other times, the female actually actively go up to the male and present herself to him. So it just really depends. Unlike leopards, where it's almost exclusively the females that initiate, and lions will not leave their natal territories. So the lionesses are not going to go mate with a male in a group of females' territory. They will stay within their own territory while mating. And again, unlike leopards, who will often go 3 or 4 territories over to mate. See, quite nice little rotund belly there, full of waterbuck. So even though these lions look like they might be dead, they're not, fast asleep. But James has got something tiny and living.
I'm not going to look at you, everybody, because inside this buffalo skull, I'll show you what we're looking at just now, but just look at that. Can you see that? It's a gecko. And you won't believe where it's living. Look at it moving. That's the microscope that's shining on it. I've got a torch in there. It's probably about the head is probably smaller than half the size of my thumbnail. And it's got its eggs in here. And by in here, I'll show you what I mean shortly. Let's just enjoy this unbelievable sighting. I don't know what kind of gecko it is. There, it's moved. Look at its tail. Ooh, that's my focus going, not that, that's me. And you see, I'm just going to try and shift the light a bit onto his head. There we go. So that's you're looking at it through my computer screen, basically, the it's filming. And look how beautifully camouflaged it is. And I just want to show you, it's got eggs in here. And you can see them at the bottom left-hand side there. That's them there. The bottom left-hand side, those 2 little white things. I'll try and change the focus slightly to get in on them. No, we're just getting spider web there. There. That's them there. Now, have a look. As Gert pulls away, just look what they're living in. My lap is a very dead, old and dying, well, it's not well dead, where it's living. About this probably that and I can't even see there. I can see the gecko. Oh, now I can see how big he is. Okay, so he's about the size of my middle finger. He's about that long, living inside this buffalo. So, I mean, every little tiny thing out here is an ecosystem for something. And I'm always reminded of this when I sell like this. I did this really long leg, and she had a little ball of eggs, and by the time we'd finished our broadcast, all of those eggs had hatched into little spiderlings, and it was an amazing thing to see. But I'm reminded constantly, when we see an elephant push over a tree, it's not destruction, it's far more creation than it is destruction. Brent Leo Smith has got the lion still. Let's go and catch up with him.
We've got gusting wind, which is obviously great hunting weather, but not when you're preoccupied with mating. Now, the very flat cat still at the moment. It's definitely worth our while spending some time here. This could be quite early in the mating progress. From what I spoke to the guys in the west, and they weren't really mating yet, they were going through the motions. So she might be also in a false estrus, and that's luring him along. I can't see properly yet, but I think it is the youngest Nkuhuma lioness that is here. So this will be her sort of first bout of mating, and it's actually quite unlikely that she will get pregnant from it. Normally needs to be a little bit older. So we've seen quite a lot of leopard mating recently, and it's quite a violent process. And Adam is wondering, is the male lion's penis barbed like a male leopard's penis? And it is. And it is quite an uncomfortable process, especially in the early beginnings of mating. And you will see some serious aggression. So like the male leopard, the male lion bites down on the female to try keep her submissive during the mating. Because as he dismounts, like a leopard, they quite often turn around, smack, and try bite them. So it's a very aggressive, probably a bit slower, and leopard's a bit faster on that dismount than a lion, but just as aggressive and lots of growling and biting and such. So it is barbed. I think you'll find most cats' penises are barbed, even the domestic house cats. That's why they make such a terrible racket when they're mating. If we look carefully at him, let's have a look at his schnoz. Let's see if we can see any nice new scars. That's where he's likely to get a smack from mating. And I can't see any particularly fresh ones. Those just look like normal old little lion scars and scratches. See, he's even got a scar just in that light-coloured skin below his eye. Now, that light-coloured skin's there for a reason. You can see it's slightly lighter than the surrounding skin, and that's to help with night vision. So, lions, if it was completely dark, no ambient light whatsoever, they would not be able to see. So they do need some ambient light around, and that little light-coloured strip of fur there helps to gather in light from around. Even on a dark, cloudy night, there's enough ambient reflection off the clouds for a lion to be able to see. There's a big misconception when it comes to a lot of predators in Africa that the full moon's good for them. It's not, it's the opposite. So full moon is not great hunting weather. It also enables the impala and everything else to see a lot better than they can on a dark night. So it's one of the big misconceptions. And you can see the wind. Oh, I can hear that Ellie. It keeps getting closer. Wouldn't it be fun if the Ellies decided to come visit? They're probably about 60, 70 meters from what I can hear in that direction that Jandre's got the camera. And then we get some nice big Acacia exuvialis thorns there. Look how long those are. And those are bigger than my fingers. Well, not bigger, but longer than my fingers. About the same size as the nail that went through your foot, Chandra. Good memories. Yes. He has been quite irritating while he's been a cripple, hopping around and on his crutches and moping about not being able to go on game drive. But he is back with us today. Now, I don't think these lions are going to be doing too much right now. So I think while we sit here, I'm going to have a look at some vegetation and see if we can do a nearly impossible tree quiz while we wait for the lions to do something interesting. And I think I've got one. I think I've got one. And I'll ask Jandre to pop the camera over there. And I think I've got a tree quiz that's going to catch you. You know, it's been so sharp recently. So if we keep going around, Jandre, I'll tell you when to stop. So just behind this the buffalo thorn, a little bit more to the right, a little bit lower. There we go, through, basically straight through to behind the buffalo thorn there. There we go, very distinct shape. Now, if we look at the second one at the back, okay, up a little bit. No, you're on the right bush, I just went there, that branch. Look at that, very, very distinct. You can see the little branchlets or spines with the leaves on it are always completely perpendicular. Now, it's named, I'm going to have to give you a hint because it is quite a difficult one. It's named after a nocturnal mammal that I would really like to see on one of our sunset safaris. So if you know what bush that is, let me know, and you can do that by dropping me an email on questions@wildearth.tv or use the hashtag SafariLive on Twitter. Very, very interesting bush and very, very interesting angles. And the shape of those little branchlets and spines are another hint to which nocturnal mammal they're named after. Jandre and I are going to continue to play the patience game with these sleeping lions. So while we do that, let's go back and see what Jamie's up to.
We are doing the opposite of the patience game, I think, which is just continuing along to see if we can't pick up on where Tingana went off the road and moved into the bush. And we're just going to keep on checking, and then I'm going to once we get to the dam, I'm going to let Herbert jump out and have a look around. One thing he is going to have to be very careful of today is that hippo out of the water. On a cold, cloudy day like today, sorry, Liam, get a branch to the hand. On a cold, cloudy day like today, everybody's got to be on the lookout for hippo out of water, particularly since there's not terribly much food around, which means they're taking advantage of any opportunity to move out and feed whenever they have time to do so. What we might do, depending on how the signal's going, is we might have to return to DRC just to sort some things out. But for now, it seems to be holding up just fine. Tingana wandered all the way from Arathusa last night, across through Djuma, and north along Buffelshoek Cut Line, and then presumably wound up somewhere near Buffelshoek Dam. Let's see if we can't figure out where he is. Oh, the elephants have been very busy today. Or it was the wind, actually. Although I'm gonna go with elephants, Liam. I'm gonna go with elephants. The amount of scrape marks, unless it was another one of. I don't think wind does that. Do you? Unless it was elephant. Unless it was James mistaking a stump for a good place to drive again. This morning he hit something of an iceberg in the boat. Managed to, I think he nearly catapulted Brian right off the Mahindra completely. And somehow Brian, through skills honed over months and years of clinging onto the back while we race after wild dog and such things, Brian somehow managed to stay intact and on the back. And you'll be happy to know that the Mahindra, the boat, the Titanic, whatever we want to call it, is relatively undamaged. We hope, as far as we know. And a good afternoon to Lael, while we make our way around to a herd of elephants that is also thinking about an afternoon drink. The elephants is actually a really good example in answer to Lael's question. So Lael's question is whether or not we think that Sindile would recognize our voices, or whether or not any of the other animals do, as I attempt to position our boat in a good spot to look at these elephants. Elephants, Lael, I'm pretty sure do. In fact, I'm almost certain that they do. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that is the case. But that's in situations with elephants that are in some kind of captivity, where they are associated with one person, or in the wild, but again, associated only with one person. Now, do I think that this cow recognizes my voice? No, probably not. We might have met before. If that is the case, it's difficult to keep track of all of the different elephants, although she's got some nice markings on her ear. Big old girl. Do I think that Sindile would recognize our voices? No, I don't. He might recognize the voices of the people that were responsible for bringing him food in captivity. I'm not sure exactly how that was done. There's a chance he might recognize that. I've known cheetah to be able to recognize the sound of different vehicles approaching their enclosures and respond to those that they associate with food, and I've seen that with a lot of different animals. Hello, little one, hiding at the back there. Do I think that animals have the capability? Yes, absolutely. I think that it's entirely possible that an animal could learn the sound of an individual person's voice. The difference is here that unless we were to spend an inordinate amount of time with one particular animal, they are exposed to several different types of voices almost all the time. So it's more about tone than it is about the individual. And personally, I think maybe the hyenas at the den site might have learned to recognize our voices, but do they care? Not really. I don't think they're going to change their behavior in any way. Again, it's entirely about tone. Most of you know that when we find ourselves in close proximity to elephants, I think all of us will start to talk to them almost instinctively. And we do it in a very low tone, very gentle voice, so as not to upset them. They don't need high-pitched yelping or yelling or any kind of raised tone. They're very sensitive to that. I don't think that Sindile would recognize my voice, for example, or James's or Brent's. In fact, I think that for now, Sindile is going to run as fast as possible away from all of us if he does come upon us. Now, while we sit with these elephants, one of the most intelligent creatures out here, and Elise, you were wondering about an elephant brain size, and I know you were discussing the different brain sizes with James. Not as big in proportion to the animal as ours is, if that makes any sense. So if we were the size of an elephant, our brains would be the same size proportionately. An elephant's brain is actually not all that much larger than a human's. It's just a little bit bigger. A lion's brain is roughly the size of a tennis ball. I think James would probably have been discussing that, maybe a bit bigger. And if I had to try and give you a good example of what an elephant's brain size would be, a watermelon. And not a huge watermelon, but a watermelon, I think, would probably be the best size comparison. And I'm talking about a small watermelon. I'm now picturing it in my head. So they don't have as large a brain in proportion to their body size as you might expect. That being said, it's what's inside that brain that is so incredibly important. They've got nerve cells all around in the areas devoted to emotional development and social structure, so social bonding, as well as to proprioception, so their spatial perception of the world. And those nerve pathways are so highly developed that they're matched only by human beings, whales and dolphins, and the great apes. There's something incredible when an elephant looks at you. And Michael, who's 13, you're also thinking along those lines, and you're wondering if human beings have the biggest brains of all animals or just the biggest in relation to our body size. And the answer is the latter, so the biggest in proportion to our body size. Something like a whale, particularly killer whales or orcas, have enormous brains. So do elephants. The elephant's brain is a little bit bigger than ours, just a little bit though. Not much bigger. That is very much a proportion thing. And again, it's what's inside that brain that counts. Look at this little one sticking its trunk into mommy's mouth. I want some of that too. A little bit of knobthorn to snack on in the afternoon. And while our elephants munch peacefully away on the trees of the area, James has got another type of insect that eats wood.
A soldier, everybody, removed from its colony by Geraldine the cheesecake. She went out onto quarantine clearings and kidnapped the soldier from his mound. We'll have to put him back though, don't worry. Let's just have a look at him under the microscope. See his rather impressive pincers and his jointed antennae that are looking at you, trying to figure out why that is unbelievable. Look at that picture. That is so cool. All right, now we're going to put him under the microscope. And with any luck, he'll look even more amazing to you. Let's just sharpen that focus a bit. There we go. So that's his little thorax there. They're his unbelievable jointed antennae that are being blown in the wind. Now, an insect is something called an arthropod, right? And an arthropod means jointed segment as far as I remember. And you can see that every segment on this insect is jointed. And that's why they're called arthropods. He's not so happy to be with us anymore. I'm just going to try and shift him slightly. But those impressive mandibles, everybody, will stick into you. They will draw blood. They have done on many occasions, and the only reason he's not savaging me as we speak is that he's too cold. So he is moving a little bit, but not... He's now burrowing in between my fingers. But look at those incredible mandibles. The mandibles are the spiky mouth parts, obviously. All right, let's take him out from there. And you can imagine the sort of damage they do, and I'll try and get him to bite me because it's not that unpleasant. He's too cold now. He's too cold to bite me. Isn't he amazing? So I think we'll probably get Jerry to put him back where he comes from. And he's almost translucent at the back there, you can see. Anyway, we'll put him back in his mound. And while we're doing that, I think Brent Leo Smith is still with the sleeping lions.
Look at her.
As you can see, these lions have not moved an inch. They're still sleeping, which leads me to believe this is possibly very early on in the courtship, or maybe even a false estrus that she's just flirting and not doing much else. But well done, I think, Lucy, James, Richard, and I'll remember the name in a second, and Barbara Good got it correct. It was indeed the porcupine bush was the nearly impossible tree quiz, so obviously it wasn't that impossible. Chandra, we're going to have to find a harder one. Let's have a look around. So while these lions aren't doing too much, we're going to definitely try utilize... Oh, sorry, I've got to call someone on the radio before he drives past me. Abel, look back towards the Shkova. But keep coming, there's a 2-track up ahead, and then come into the west. Sorry about that. Abel was on his way here, and He was shooting past us there. So what you told me there was on the game drive radio. So we're in contact with all the other vehicles around us, and that enables us to have the best possible chance at finding creatures. And it's a team game finding these animals, so we share our sightings with everyone. So back to the sleeping kitties. I'm going to keep searching. I think I'm going to be able to find some other interesting little plants that might prove to be a little bit more difficult than the porcupine bush. Oh, there we go. Heads up, he's heard Abel coming to have a look. Oh, he's tight. So James Cole is wondering about lion penises. I did mention that they were barbed. He's wondering what is the evolutionary reason for a lion to have a barbed penis. Well, it's to help ensure insemination. So it's to try and make sure the semen is as deep as possible inside and doesn't drip out. So that's why they are barbed. And literally as he pulls away, it really does hurt the female. But and she can get very grumpy about it. But it is an evolutionary adaptation to try and ensure that she gets inseminated and becomes pregnant. So it is one of those things. Unfortunately, once she is pregnant and she manages to raise those cubs, she doesn't have to do it for 3 years or so. But if she does lose cubs, of course, that's another interesting thing. Immediately, within a couple of weeks, if she loses her cubs, she'll come back into estrus and start mating again. Now, when pride coalition or coalition takeovers happen, so the dominant male lions in the area change, the first sort of set of mating is a false estrus. So what happened is when the Matimbas were chased by these Birmingham boys, the females tried to avoid them for quite a long time because they had a young male and 2 young females with her that were not old enough that the Birminghams would kill, which they did. They managed to kill this one sister, the young female here's sister, and 2 adult lionesses during that coalition takeover. But immediately after that, they would have sort of accepted, so to speak, the fact that the Birmingham boys were now the dominant male lion coalition in this area. They would have mated with them, but it would have been under a false estrus. So they would have tricked the males into thinking that they were properly mating. But this is by no ways by choice. This is just it's an evolutionary adaptation that lions have. And leopards to a degree. So basically what they do, that reason is that false estrus. It buys them a bit of time to see if this new male coalition is going to stay around or is going to be kicked out immediately. And then normally the second estrus cycle, now if that coalition has become dominant and is very much not moving anywhere, they will mate. I mean, they will mate properly and then hopefully produce cubs. So little lion cubs are covered in little spots, and that's to help them hide when they're left by their mothers. And Pierre's wondering, at what age does a lion lose its spots? I'm just going to try to go forward a little bit, John, so we can have a look at her belly a bit better. And there we go. Now, this is an adult lioness. Now, she's about 3. You can see she's got her spots. And we can look at older lions as well. In a lot of cases, they don't ever lose their spots. They just become less pronounced. Oh, it's very tired kitties we're dealing with at the moment. Wind's picking up again. Now, they've actually come quite a long way this morning. So they were on our neighbor, and they've covered probably from where they were, they've probably covered a good 7 or 8 kilometers. We're going to stay here. I'm really hoping they do get moving. But you can see they're lying quite prominently out in the open. Jamie's got something that's hidden in the bush.
This is just a perfect example of what the animals do on a day like today. We've got probably, I would guess, at least 12, maybe even up to 15 nyala hidden in this one patch of bush. It seems to be the best option on a windy day like today, the most shelter to be gained. And if we look carefully, we might be able to, unfortunately I think it's hidden right at the back, might be able to see the cutest little baby nyala that is only, I would say, a couple of weeks old, if that, moving about at the back. Is a really, really tiny baby. The animals all very upset and unsettled in this howling gale, including that elephant that we were with earlier, who told me in no uncertain terms as I was leaving that I should better leave and possibly never come back. And a couple of head shakes and a trumpet or two, and by making sure very resolutely that she followed us all the way down the road, not charging, just walking resolutely with her head from side to side, just to tell us that it was time for us to go at that point. So we took her word for it and we moved off. I've just heard word from Taxon that during the day, in between the game drives, Tingana crossed onto Torchwood and then, by the sounds of it, carried on straight through Torchwood and south into Chitwa. So he's clearly a man on a mission, or at least a male leopard on a mission. He's off somewhere. And he just decided that Djuma was just a place to pass by for last night and this morning. There are so many angry elephants about. It's quite interesting. You could just hear them trumpeting off in the distance. Amazing what an effect the wind has on animals. And I feel that as well. I'm not sure if any of you do at home, but I certainly feel that unsettling feeling when the wind starts to blow. I'm not a wind person. I don't enjoy it. There's something about it that makes me anxious and a bit unsettled. And I know I'm not the only person who feels that way. I'm not sure if any of you out there feel that way as well. But there's something instinctive I feel within me. Yes? VM loves it. VM's having a great time. The little baby's at the back. I'm going to go forward fractionally. It was so brave earlier. It might decide to stay. What we'll do is we'll get the very subtle start to the boat. Let's try it. Vroom. Full steam ahead, says VM. I'm only going full steam ahead a meter to try and see if we can't get a better perspective. The Nyala definitely don't want to be on screen today. In fact, I bet that they wish they could find somewhere really safe and secure in weather like this. There's the baby. Hard to actually tell since it's hidden away. I wonder if they feel like, I don't know, just constantly terrified in this sort of weather. They know they can't hear, they know they can't smell. Safety in numbers seems to be the way forward. Just the slightest motion tends to upset them. Now, Brent Palmer, you were wondering about the best way to spot the difference between impala and inyala. The best way, Brent, for the females at least, and for all impala don't have stripes all the way along the side of their bodies. So inyala females, which is probably the only one that you could confuse with a inyala male, with an impala, because of the color that they are, that reddish, beautiful ochre color. The inyalas have white stripes down their sides, the impala do not. Now, an inyala bull, on the other hand, is a completely different thing. A male inyala is a dark grey in color with a huge shaggy beard, tan stockings, and enormous, very differently shaped horns to the impala. So inyala male's horns, they're trumpeting away. As long as they're not trumpeting at me, that's fine. They kind of do this, like that, whereas impala horns kind of curve backwards and then up. Don't know if that helped you at all. That's my antler, my horn dance. It doesn't work at all. But the most emphatic different pattern is the stripes on the inyala. I think let's continue on. Our nyala are very hidden. Let's see if we can't move on and find some other things and play dodge the elephant at the same time. There's also lots and lots of male elephant around. I mean, when I had that sighting, when Viam and myself had the sighting yesterday on quarantine, there were probably... Don't you start with your nonsense. It's okay. All right. Okay, where's the rest of your family that you belong to? If you're that unsettled. That was an elephant, by the way. Also very, very upset. So upset that I actually didn't even want to. It was a young female. It wasn't going to charge us in any way. Not that I want to test that theory. But she just looked so unhappy. I didn't even want to stop and upset her even further. As we go off in search of some of the larger things, James has a moth to show you.
Look, everybody, somebody is looking at you. He's a moth, obviously, and he's called a hawk moth. And what I think is interesting about, I can't identify exactly which hawk moth species he is, but if you look at his eyes there, those are the two smaller black things that you can see. They run into some black markings on his back, and I think that you'll find that that's a bit of a con job. Now, many of these moths have got eye spots on their wings. Many of them have got sort of false eye patches almost all over the place. And I think that if you're an animal hunting in the night time and you happen to see those great big black blotches on the back of this moth, I think you might think that the moth was slightly bigger than it actually is. But now, I mean, a moth like this could quite easily just fly through your room or land on your bed or flap into your hair, and you'll scrap it away, and you wouldn't really notice it until you start to look at the unbelievable detail. And what I want you to look at now is just his underside. Look at the very, very fine hairs that he has on his legs. Isn't that amazing? Now, this chap has been sitting in the freezer for some time. Geraldine froze him for us. He's long dead. Unfortunately, when I took him out of his jar, I broke a leg off him. But he's now in a better place. So he's very, very fragile, but he's got the most unbelievable legs. And then, if you look at his back or his wings, all of those colors are made of single scales. Now, I'm sure many of you know when you catch a moth, or when a moth flaps onto you, it leaves that sort of dust on you, right? Or on your fingers, or on whatever it's landed on. Those are the scales that come off a moth's wing. And if I touch this moth's wings, I'll be covered in little scales. And all of those little scales make up those incredible colors. And if you look carefully there, we've got black and gold and orange and white and a bit of sort of mauvey purple, some brown, some bronze and copper. I think it's absolutely spectacular, and that lovely honey-colored yellow in between those fake eye stripes. Isn't that amazing? I'm going to put him back in here. And Aaron, you want to know what the biggest moth we get here is? Well, it would be one of the emperor moth species. I can show you a couple of pictures of them. But basically they'd be about that big, I suppose. Mopani moths are very big. In terms of length, a lunar moth is probably about that big from top to tail. And I'll just quickly show you a couple of the emperor moths. I've come to the moth section perfectly on time. And I can't find the emperors, which is of course very embarrassing as we are live. I will find them. I will, I promise. I went the wrong way in the book, you see. Here are the emperors. There's the Mopani moth there. And he, of course, is made from, well, he's edible. His caterpillar is edible. This thing here is a local, which I wouldn't say delicacy. I hesitate to use that term when describing eating a hairy caterpillar, but certainly an important part of the diet out here. That's the Mopani moth. And then I just want to show you, there's the Luna moth over there. And that Luna moth is about 120 centimeters. So that's 120 millimeters, that's 12 centimeters. And that is almost 6 inches long. So that's about the largest moth that we get out here. Now, there's great excitement, everybody. One of the lions has lifted his head, he's yawned, and he's licking his foot.
Here we go, the Birmingham boys popped his head up. He was doing a little bit of grooming. There. I'm not sure how long it's going to last for. There we go. Trying to get rid of some ticks and fleas when you see that little bite, using those front incisors. Obviously that tick stuck in there. So guys, just have to be on the radio. There's another guy who's on his way in here. Oh, great shot, Chandra. Tax, when you see there's a russet bush willow branch in the road, and there's a 2-track heading to the west. Best views from that side. So there you go. Lions are quite fastidious groomers. Even though they are quite dirty, they try. Sorry about that, I'm just hand signaling to Tax where he needs to go. So even though they do look quite cleanly and they do lick and clean each other quite a lot, they're still full of parasites. Lots of ticks, fleas, and even worse, the parasites you can get in their claws and in their mouths. I mean, a lion will happily eat a completely rotting corpse, so you can imagine what manner of manky creatures live in a lion's mouth. Liver flukes, hosts of different types of tapeworm. And if you ever have to do anything with wild lions in terms of veterinary type of stuff, if you're darting them, moving them, you should always wear gloves. And even after wearing gloves, it's always a very good idea to take a course of worm mixture to try to kill all the parasites you might pick up from handling a lion. So there are quite a few other vehicles who are wanting to come into the sighting. So we'll spend a little bit longer here and then we're going to move out. So of course we identify leopards from spot patterns. Pierre's wondering, do lions have a unique type of spot pattern? They do. It's a little bit more difficult to see. So we're going to go really close in on his face again. If he decides to look at us. See, now here, with lions, you generally look for nicks and other things like that. You've also got that very distinct scarring on his right shoulder, a bit higher. There we go. And that actually looks like a fungal infection. Yeah. So that looks like a fungal infection to me, not rather than a scar. So that can change. Those infections get better and worse. So one way to look at them is their nose. Let's try on the female. No, she's also turning her back over myself. Come on, look this way, madam. So the noses, they have quite a few interesting little blotches on the nose. Also, if you spend enough time with lions, certain researchers use gum splotches. So they've got little dots, dark dots on the pink of their gums, and that is probably the most accurate way. But of course, tears in the ears, any visible scarring is always a good way to help identify lions, kinks and tails, missing tips to tails. So we've noticed, I've tried to find out exactly what fungal infection is this, but I can't find any information on it. I'm pretty sure it is a fungal infection. There we go, have a look there. Very interesting. You can see there's some ticks on the bottom side of it, and I think I see a flea crawling through his hair as well. So we've noticed a couple of the Birminghams and one of the Nkuhumas has this fungal infection. They might have picked it up because it is so dry at the moment. There you go, there's a flea, just near the tick, bottom right hand corner. I just saw a little flea go through there. Oh, there's also some flies as well. Now, a fungal infection like this doesn't actually really pose too great a threat. I don't think it's sarcoptic mange, which would be a problem, but it is definitely something. I was hoping they're going to get moving. If they don't get moving in the next little while, we're going to make space for some other people to come have a look at these glorious cats. And we'll definitely try come back a little bit later. So hopefully they move into a bit of a better area just now. We're going to make our way out of here and give someone else a chance to come in. But we will be back a little later. But in the meantime, let's go see what Jamie's up to.
While Brent heads out away from the lions, we have come through to Vuyatela Dam to see whatever in this drainage line. And of course, whenever we come in this direction, there's always the hope that that lioness might decide to show herself. I think I had a bit of an internal debate about whether or not she did have cubs, just because I couldn't see suckle marks on the 3 lioness that we saw 2 days ago. However, she's been back once again into that drainage line and then out again in exactly the same place, and all of the signs point to the idea that she does have cubs there. Maybe she just wasn't in our sighting. Maybe it was just we didn't have the right Nkuhuma lionesses with us. But the fact that she's been to and from in the last 10 days, to and from exactly the same place, suggests to me that there are definitely little ones there that she is taking care of. Somewhere hidden in the Mwati drainage system. And here we have a zebra and a wildebeest. And I think that is probably our quarantine wildebeest. He has a territory up that reaches up towards quarantine and then all the way towards the pan. We haven't seen our wildebeest herd in a very long time. They seem to have moved off to greener pastures, so to speak, although I don't know where one finds a greener pasture at this stage. In the winter months, you can see the grass is completely dry. There's hardly anything for these grazers left to eat. That's winter, that's a standard winter thing. It's just come a bit earlier than to be expected. I've got a slightly nervous zebra stallion slowly making his way towards the dam, very cautiously. Everybody on a serious high alert. He's quite a young zebra as well, just judging from his size and by his look. And also the fact that he is all alone, so he hasn't managed to secure himself a herd just yet. Definitely unpleasant weather to be an animal out here. these open clearings, and I think that you'll find tonight the animals are going to cluster around quarantine and maybe even these open spaces. At this point, they've got a toss-up between being a bit more sheltered from the wind, and it is very windy, and having an open view of the surrounding areas to make sure that any predators don't come and get them in the middle of the night. Tonight is going to be perfect hunting weather. Okay, let's carry on down south a little bit to see if we can't pick up on any signs of Karula moving about. Don't think so though. I think that, well, maybe leopards in this kind of weather can be moving at any time of the day. Just look at how far Tingana decided to walk from last night up until this afternoon, where he's hanging around Chitwa Dam. He's probably covered not in a straight line, but in terms of the distance he's walked, easily 10 kilometers during the night. Through Djuma and then north and then south and then east and then south. He's covered a tremendous amount of space in a very short period of time. The same applies for that mating lion pair that came south from Buffelshoek. I think that's where they were last seen. Travelled all the way down to where they're sitting now on Gallagher Shortcut. It's days like today makes you aware of just how far into winter we really are. I still don't think it's going to rain though. I think that we're safe for now. While we trundle off to the south, I'm going to send you back to James, who I think is sheltered in the tent, but I'm not entirely sure because the wind might be creating a serious tunnel in there. Let's find out from his perspective.
Well, there's a gentle breeze blowing across my rather hairy legs, but I'm definitely more comfortable than Brent Leo Smith, who seems to be wearing gloves pilfered from some kind of special service agent / skier. I'm not sure where he got those from. Might have even been some kind of sophisticated engineer. Anyway, Jamie, of course, always looks magnificent, but it is, I think, a lot chillier where they are than where we are. Now, also having a slightly chilly time and therefore slightly immobile is this fellow that we have there on the screen. And what I will do is take him out once we've had a look at him under the microscope there. This, if I'm not mistaken, is a pygmy bush cricket. But it might be something else. That's as close as I can get. Let me just refocus him. Oops. No, my screen. Sorry, everybody. There we go. That's much better. No, horrid. Horrid. There. There we go. No. This is getting awkward. Sorry about that. Now he's moving around. Won't sit still. There. Sit still. You cretinous creature. Never mind. Let's pick him out here and have a look. Anyway, he's not very big. He's also not going anywhere very soon because he's lost one of his back legs. Now, this is not unusual, of course. This is an end-of-season cricket. I don't think he's going to last very long at all. I think he's almost sort of up with his season. And if you look at him, I'm not sure that he's actually mature. And I say that because if you look, if I tip him over like that onto my hand, you can see that his wings, look at that. You can see the front wings and you can see the hind wings. The front wings are those sort of My finger's too fat. Oh, hang on, I've got a little grass stalk here. Did he just relieve himself on my hand there, Gert? I think he did.
like.
He just made a dump on my hand. That's delightful. Right, over there, everybody. There, no, stand still, are the forewings, and you can see his little hind wings at the back as well. Now, on an adult cricket, those wings would be longer. And on the youngsters, the instars, remember crickets don't go through what we call a hollow metabolic life cycle, so they don't have a caterpillar or a larva. The little ones just look like the adults, but they don't have long wings. They've got the short wings, and this chap may just be flightless anyway. But I can't find exactly what he is. The closest thing we can get to him is a pygmy bush cricket, simply because he has got these short or hard forewings, and his ovipositor, her ovipositor, that's this, sorry, let me just turn him round, there we go. The ovipositor is that kind of flattened spade-like thing at the back. That's the ovipositor. And it's flattened and it's upturned, and that's why we think that's what he is. He's getting a little bit freaked out, and I think he's also getting, ooh, the wind's blowing now. I'm tempted to keep him, you know, because I think that the chances of him surviving out there in the wild are very small, so we might just keep him and then feed him up and keep him for TV. Geraldine, here you are. Again, find him some food. Thank you so much. Now, James Richard, a very nice question. You want to know about how it is that you would go about identifying whether a moth was diurnal or nocturnal. Well, the diurnal and nocturnal moths are actually quite easy to separate from each other because of their color. The diurnal moths tend to be bright, but if you are a moth and you are active during the daytime, at least active at night, it's rather pointless being bright. So here's a whole lot of pictures of nocturnal moths, and you can see their caterpillars are bright, and that's kind of aposematic coloration, that's warning coloration, but the adults tend to be a lot darker and much more camouflaged for the night time, whereas the diurnal moths, which I will fan you shortly, like these ones here, like these burnets and footmen, they're called, they are much more coloured. And of course we had wonderful sightings earlier this year of the burnet moths, those, what they call the fire grid burnet moths. They were bright red, wonderful bright red velvety colours on the abdomen. And they, of course, are diurnal, and they feed on the zebrawood trees. And when the zebrawood's around, that's where they are. And it's really good to have them around, of course, during the day. And, well, I'm going to show you this thing when you come back next time. Let's go across to Jamie, who seems to have found an impala.
Oh, if you think you are having a bad day, then have a look at this poor chap. Well, an impala that has made it through the rut, but only just. Definitely not in the best condition. And if we have a look at the right-hand side of his face, wait, excuse me, hold on, we're not finished looking at your face just yet. Shame. He's definitely been beaten up. The right side of his face is incredibly scarred. Almost looks like he potentially damaged his eye as well. Kind of like our friend Nelson, the one-eyed, one-horned impala. But he gives us a nice contrast, to go back to the question we were asked earlier about telling the difference between Inyala and impala. And there we go. If we have a look at the coat or the flanks of an impala, a very clear white belly, but there are no white stripes running from the top of the spine down towards the stomach, nor are there any white dots in that vicinity. Now, he's made life difficult. I was going to try and show you what his face looks like. Sorry guys, just listening to the Game Drive channel. It sounds as though they have found Karula. And she is on Little Gowrie with her 2 cubs alive and well. Now, that's something of a comfort for you. I'm going to try and move forward a little bit. And since Oh, oh. Oh, shame. There you go. You can have a look and kind of see. The right-hand side of his face. I'm going to go roll back. Come on. Come on, Mahendra. Yes, there we go. He definitely, as VM described one impala the other day, looks as though he has been in a bar fight. Very swollen right eyelid. I don't think there's any damage to the eye. It's quite hard to tell at this distance, but I think his eye's okay. It's just swollen and scratched up. And there's scarring all around the right-hand side of his face. Now, another difference with impala is that they are much sleeker looking, usually, than the Inyala. In this case, this poor boy has let his grooming go a bit spare at this point. He's all fluffed up and not very well groomed at all. And that is purely from fighting with other males. He hasn't had a lucky escape from a predator, he's had a lucky escape from another male impala. And it's not often that they cause each other all that serious injuries. They often scratch and bruise each other, but it's not often that they really damage. But occasionally things go wrong, and they do impale their opponent on their horns. And if I'm not very much mistaken, before we leave him, I think his belly is actually quite distended. I've just noticed that now. It doesn't look like a normal impala stomach. It looks as though it's actually quite swollen. And I wonder whether there's not some internal damage in there. I didn't realize that before. But a typical impala stomach, they're not like zebra that produce a huge amount of gas when they digest. They're ruminants. And so that kind of barrel-like stomach is unusual. Shame, boy. He's got... I'm going to reform my opinion about this impala, and I'm looking at his breathing as well. It's quite laboured, and I actually think that this impala is more seriously injured than I originally thought. Well, animals show a great resilience in terms of healing, so he may well be absolutely fine. I don't think so, though. That swelling is weird. Doesn't look normal. Shame, boy. He's going to have a rough time of things. I don't know how fast he can move. But as with almost anything out here, an injury like that could well spell death. Might not be able to get himself away from the predators. And the predators, of course, have been doing exceptionally well with the level of distraction from the male impala. We've had Karula on a male impala kill a couple of times, and several other impala kills, I think, that we've heard of. So I think Shadow's killed a male impala recently. Tingana definitely has. The leopard's taking full advantage of the impala male's distraction. Monique, you were wondering how much longer does it go on for, since it seems like it's been going on for ages. And the answer is it should be coming to an end relatively soon. We're in the middle of June, almost the middle of June. Sometimes one loses track of months, possibly years. I don't always know exactly where I am with time or space. It should be finishing very soon. We're basically hitting the second rut now. So the females that mated with the males initially but didn't fall pregnant come into a second estrus, and the male impala then, depleted of their reserves, still have to try and compete for access to them. But as sad a sight as these male impala are, it's the females that I feel the most sorry for, because they have their lambs, raise their lambs, get to the point where the lambs have just been weaned and are mature enough to look after themselves, and they're promptly having to run away from the males and then falling pregnant once again to start the whole cycle. And they don't have a rest period like some animals do of a couple of years in between pregnancies. They go straight from one ear to the next. All right, boy, good luck. Tonight is going to be a tough night for this male impala as he struggles to find a safe spot. While we carry on, Brent has got another of the bovids to show you, this time a little bit larger.
Well, we haven't managed to get very far from the lions, and we've come across a nice big herd of buffalo. And there we go, you can see them. They're moving out into the open like the impala were doing. They're going to find a nice open spot to sleep up. Oh, there's a bit of an argument there. And to give them a little bit more protection from the predators. Now, if we come across to the right, there's a cow who's got a very interesting horn. So it looks like a natural deformity there. And we'll have a look there. See, very strange shape. Now, it looks like she was probably born with that deformity. And she's obviously rubbed it and moved it, and that's what has made that very, very interesting shape. Oh, there's an oxpecker on the one behind, in the ear. Oh, off he goes. But now, oh, there's a baby. We haven't seen many little buffaloes yet, and it's on the right. There we go. No, sorry, Jean-Andre, just keep coming. Keep coming. There we go. So, you notice how that baby is drinking. You also notice how it headbutts its mom's udders. Now that's to stimulate milk production. Not the tiniest baby, but the youngest one I've seen in a while. And you notice that he's drinking from between, or I think it's a little he, yes it is a little he, drinking from between his mother's back legs. Now buffalo are one of the only animals we have that drink like that. And there we go. This is exactly why, oh, isn't this perfectly on time? She starts moving. Now, buffalo herds traverse great distances between the areas of water and food. Sorry, Taxon's just trying to come here. Oh, firm, I'm the only one here, Taxi. So, baby buffalo have developed this knack of being able to drink while on the move. So they will actually suckle while the herd is moving. And it's the only animal that you'll see doing that. All the other ungulates out here will stop and feed. There was a bit of a buffalo argument on the other side there. There's a bull chasing another one. There's still quite a lot not out on the open area yet. They're still moving through. But I'm quite confident they're going to sleep on quarantine clearings tonight. Slightly more open gives them a little bit of a safer option during this very windy and dark night. Oh, arguments going on to the right. Oh, I don't know if you can hear that wind on the mic. It's really, it's getting stronger and stronger. So one thing is I can deal with the cold in the morning because it gets warmer. But this afternoon it's just getting colder and colder as we carry on. So if you live in the United States, you have a creature you call a buffalo as well. The American buffalo, or the bison. Now, Rob in Pennsylvania is wondering, what's the difference between these two creatures? Quite a bit, Rob. So they are obviously related. They share a common ancestor many millennia ago. They are both bovids, so both have 4 stomachs and ruminate. The main difference for me is you notice how short the hair is on the buffalo as opposed to the bison, because they don't have to deal with that incredibly cold climate you guys have. So they have much shorter hair, and notice there's quite a lot of competition between the males, and they've developed those massive bosses. And also, one of the reasons their horns are probably quite a lot more developed than American bison is they have to face more predators. So you don't have a super predator like a lion. Bears probably aren't really fast enough to catch the American buffalo, whereas the lions obviously specialize in buffalo quite in a lot of areas. So they've got this massive array of defense to try help defend for predators, as well as competing with the other males for mating rights. But if you have a look at American buffalo's horns, it's very small in comparison to an African buffalo. There we go, perfect example of a meal on wheels. So as a herd traverses through an area, those young buffalo are able to suckle. And we're noticing fewer and fewer young buffalo as this drought sets in. So they're generally going to be the first to go as the drought gets worse and worse. And we actually saw a massive herd, probably 400, with not one young baby. Now, even though our African buffalo look like they could be a close relative to the cow, it's not an ancestor of the domestic cow. It's an offshoot. They obviously share a common ancestor many moons ago. So speaking about the cattle or bovid or bovidae family, Janet's wondering, do we have Watusi cattle here in the wild? We do not, Janet. And even Watusi cattle are never in the wild. They are always looked after by people, and they occur from Uganda to the north into South Sudan. So we do not have any Watusi cattle in this area. There are some farmers that might keep it in some places in South Africa, but they're not sort of roaming the savannas as such. Now, in parts of southern Sudan, they do roam the savannas, but they are domesticated and they do have people who herd them. And moving further and further out into the clearings, you'll probably find they're going to try stop quite close to James in the tent. You should be able to get a visual of them in not too long. The average weight for a male buffalo in this part of the world is probably around 500 kilos, 1,000 pounds. But there have been recorded cases of buffalo weighing up to 900 kilograms, or around 2,000 pounds. But generally in this area, around 1,000 to 1,400 pounds. See how they're slowly moving out. They're still grazing. The ones that are not grazing are ruminating. And looking quite content ruminating there. This is a reasonable sized herd. I'm guessing probably between 150 and 200 buffalo. Maya, my cat, is wondering whether we're seeing larger herds in the winter as opposed to summer. Maybe not necessarily larger, Maya, but definitely more herds. So in summer, the herds are definitely far more spread out, and there's a lot more water and a lot more grazing available. Now the water is very limited, so we are seeing a lot more herds moving into the areas of permanent water. Now they do often have to move big distances between the areas of water and their grazing. And being a big animal like that, they do have to eat quite a lot to stay healthy. And as the dry season continues, we're going to notice more and more hips showing, and specifically the older and younger animals starting to show a bit of bone, so to speak, as the times get really tough. And you'll find the lions will probably start eating a few more buffalo as they lose condition and become easier to catch. Now, imagine all those horns charging towards you, quite fearsome in defense. Now, they won't always try to chase the lions when they are attacked. Sometimes they will sort of run away and leave one of them to be eaten. But on occasion, herds like this have been known to put up spectacular defenses of young ones or even adults that have been caught by lions. So we have a question from the tent who's obviously watching us. James wants to know, what's the story with my gloves? Well, I've got two sets of gloves. I've got my warm and fuzzy gloves for when it's really cold. It's not quite warm and fuzzy yet. These gloves are quite interesting. So I always like gloves that have little tricks so I can get my fingers out when I need them. These particular gloves are neoprene, and that finger is actually for my fly line if I was fishing or wanting to tie a hook onto the end of my line. So these are actually fishing gloves that I decided might make a welcome add-on to my many ways of dealing with the cold out here on the bush. But speaking of the tent, who is probably sitting nice and cozy, I wouldn't be surprised if they made themselves a little fire where no one can see, and they just sneak around there and go warm up while we obviously have the hard time of traveling through the African bush on the vehicles. Let's go see if they've managed to make a fire with a stick, because I don't think they've got any matches.
We thought about lighting a fire, everybody, but the fire is just out the back of the tent there, and the wind is blowing over the fire and straight in here. So what I'm doing is just standing in front of the lighting, and I'm just keeping my face nice and warm, both sides of my face. That's not why you've come to the tent. You've come to the tent to have a closer look at the buffalo skull. Now, you were looking at the buffalo, and here we have the horns of a big bull buffalo. So let's just give you an idea of the size of a buffalo's head. I'm going to stand behind it. That is how big it is. It's an enormous, enormous creature, and obviously even more enormous if it has flesh on it. And the strength required to pick up something like this is phenomenal. I think this probably weighs about, I'd say, 15 kilograms. It's obviously fleshless. So let's say when the buffalo was at its zenith, it probably weighed, no, probably a bit more, maybe 25 kilograms, which is about 60 pounds, which is obviously an enormous mass to carry on the neck. And that's why buffalo, of course, have such enormously thick necks, and they've got much heavier forequarters than they do hindquarters, because they have to carry this huge mass. Why do they need horns like this? Well, for defense, obviously, but the cows have also got horns, and they don't have this huge head or helmet on top. And this helmet on top, of course, is the boss. And in a younger animal, this would be covered in keratin too. This is you can see very nicely here, actually, there, where the keratin sheath joins onto the bone, onto the skull. And that keratin sheath on a slightly younger buffalo has almost closed up. And if I don't know if any of you have seen the buffalo we refer to as Taylor Lautner, he's got that kind of slightly half-shut eye. He's got a full boss that goes all the way across the top of his head. And it's incredibly important for them because, of course, the buffalo bulls fight with each other. That's why they need this helmet. It is to protect their brains from concussion. And you can imagine the mass of 800 kilograms of buffalo times 2, so that's 800 coming each way, which is about 2,000 pounds of buffalo each, running at about 40 kilometers an hour. That's an 80 kilometer an hour concussion that the head must cope with if they're having a big fight. And that's why they have the helmet on the males and the females don't. As females, as with most animals around the world, are less likely to fight with each other. The notable exception being, of course, the hyena. which fight with each other quite a lot. Then I know that many of you will know exactly what these are, but I learnt something interesting about them recently, well, recently as in about 3 minutes ago. These, of course, are the keratophagous moths, or the keratin-eating horn moths. And, of course, keratin is an extremely indigestible substance. And if you go and investigate hyena dung, which I wouldn't suggest you do on a regular basis, but every so often it's quite interesting to go and investigate some hyena dung, because in it, although a hyena can digest just about everything, and you can be very sure that the end of this giraffe's skull was bitten off by hyenas, and that the end of this waterbuck skull was bitten off by hyenas, and that the end of this buffalo indeed was bitten off by hyenas. Although they're able to digest this sort of thing, they're unable to digest keratin. They don't eat the horns, and that's why the hair often disappears or comes straight through them. I think you're sitting on your radio. Not? Someone's sitting on their radio. Anyway, I was totally lost. Excuse me a second. Keratin is completely indigestible, except for the family of moths that this belongs to. And you will know this moth, or this family of moths, because they live in your cupboard, and they eat your woolen clothes, and they eat the hair of animals that, well, that aren't careful enough to clean themselves free of it. Let's go across to Jamie. I see she has, some scudding grey clouds.
Here we can throw some confusion into the mix in terms of the differences between the different antelope. So Brent asked a question earlier, not our Brent, one of the viewers, Brent, asked a question about how you tell the difference between an Inyala and an Impala. Well, here's one further confusion, and that is the kudu. Now, a kudu is a member of the same family as the Inyala, so they all fall under the Traphalagus, the Traphalagian antelope tribe. And they look very similar to an eye that hasn't seen that many antelope before. They look really similar to each other. The best way to tell the difference is, well, I'll try and show you, but unfortunately most of them have moved off into the thicket. So kudu don't have that incredible rich ochre color that the female Inyala have. They do, however, have stripes down their sides. What they don't have is as many spots. Sometimes you do get kudu with maybe 1 or 2 spots on their rears, not their rears, they only have 1 rear, on their rear, but the Inyala have multiple dots all around their rears. There you go, got the plural and the singular right that time. Now, unfortunately, our kudu have largely disappeared into this really thick vegetation, so it's not going to be terribly easy to show you. It's actually a stunning herd. There's so many little ones in this particular group. And there's one little calf with a backwards J on its left-hand side that I've come to recognize just from seeing it regularly. It's got a backwards J on its left rump, and then it has a really interesting sort of 3-pronged stripe on the other side. And not the clearest view of a kudu, but it does give you a little bit more of an indication how one goes about telling the difference. They're also a slightly darker color than the Inyala, and their manes are more prominent on their necks and their shoulders, with a kind of a gap in the middle where the neck joins the rest of the body. They're also, it's very hard for you guys to see, they're also much larger than the Inyala. Much taller and a bit more gangly, if I could phrase it like that. But both Inyala and kudu love these hidden places in dense vegetation. Oh, look at that little one. Still a bit scruffy and fluffy. There's the male at the back with his large twirling horns, and he's causing a bit of chaos because he's trying to test the scent of any female he can get his nose to. Oh, she's given him a response there. And that's called induced urination, what she just did. I'm not sure if she actually fully urinated, but lifting her tail up like that is an instinctive response to the attentions of a male. He's going to give her a jolly good sniff and then perform that very strange grimace expression, which is called a phlegm grimace, where the animal lifts up their top lip and crunches up their nose, and kind of, with lions it looks like they're snarling. With lions or leopards it looks like they're snarling. With kudu it just looks ridiculous. It looks like they're pulling a face. They kind of go, it's very silly. The funniest phlegm grimace in the world is a white rhino. A white rhino, because they've got those big flat lips, when they do that they look like they're actually sort of going in for a kiss. They kind of do this. It's hilarious to witness. Buffalo do it as well. And they're also very funny when they do it. But that is my best impression of a phlegm grimace, and I encourage you all, wherever you are at home, to phlegm grimace and tell me how that works out for you. It's just so that you know. For animals, it is perfectly acceptable, but I've been told that it is not appropriate to phlegm grimace in polite company. Maybe don't be sort of wander up to the table full of food and phlegm grimace at it. I'm told that's not socially acceptable. We're the boat that rocked. Haha. I got the reference. And on we go to see what other animals we can find hiding in the bushes. I was really tempted to drive into the middle of the dam and shout the Diamond Captain and I'll go down with my ship, but all the dams are dry, so none of that performance will be happening today. And Sandy, you were saying that you thought I named the vehicle Maggie last night. I did. You are absolutely correct. And it's not that it didn't go down well. It's actually... Oh, sorry, guys. Over to the lines. I'll explain the name later.
Okay, we've come back to the lions at the perfect time. Okay, how's that? Isn't that beautiful? Look at the wind blowing through his hair. Now, I don't think that was proper mating. Just from her reaction and that, I don't think there was actual penetration there. But look, he's scent marking. He feels like he's got the job done. So we arrived at the perfect time. The lions have seemed to have got up and started moving. And she looks quite hungry, even though his belly is very full. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? I hope you guys are getting some screenshots of that. Isn't she just too beautiful? So if you hear a click, don't worry, it's just my camera. I'm also going to take a screenshot, but of my own. I definitely think that's the young Nkuhuma female. Now, even though he's got such a big belly and they've been on a waterbuck carcass, there were two males there. I think the males definitely had the lion's share. And that's where that saying comes from. So even if the females make a kill, if a male lion is around, he will take and eat the majority of that kill. Well, that was good timing. After them sleeping for over an hour, we decided to leave, then come back. Has he been lying on... Oh no, it's his tail. I just thought he'd been lying on some burnt pieces of wood. Now, he's got quite an impressive mane, and Debbie in Vancouver is wondering how old will he be when he gets his full mane. Well, Debbie, he's probably got his full mane. It might darken and thicken up, but at the age he's nearly 6 now, and he's got a full mane. It might get darker, maybe a little bit thicker with age, but I don't think it's going to extend like one of the Matimbas down its belly. That also just depends on the individual genetics. Let's go a bit closer now that they've stopped moving. We just wanted to make sure you didn't miss anything as we came around the corner. Also the length of time, but we sat there without them doing anything, and the fact that just looking at that mating, I don't think he was actually mating properly. Oh, there's a stretch from the lady. You can see she's eaten something, but she still is a bit peckish. Oh, she's going to have a stretch on the tree. Clean her claws as well. You can see how they extended there. And so, like your domestic cat, they do like scratching posts, except with those massive claws, most trees will suffice. Okay, let's move again. Okay, let's just park opposite the big boy. Oh, isn't he a pretty boy? Now, most of the lions in this part of the Kruger National Park will be probably testing positive for feline tuberculosis that they get from eating buffalo. So it's a mutated form of bovine tuberculosis. And Debbie's wondering, how old will the lions be before they start showing signs? And one of the signs of feline tuberculosis is growth, specifically on the elbows. They can show them from up to a few weeks old, Debbie. Some of them will only develop it much later in life. I think it just depends on the different individual. Now, there is some research going into this, but it's a theory I think I hold quite a lot of stock in. And of course, it can't be 100% confirmed yet till the research has been done and those papers are released. And that's that. A lot of lions now are showing a natural immunity to the TB, as in with the buffalo. And you're not seeing it as predominantly as we were a few years ago when I first started guiding in the Sabi sands. I mean, 1 in 3 almost had those TB patches, but you're definitely not seeing it nearly as commonly. And I've actually seen in some cases where the TB patches have gone down, like on that young Nkahuma female. Now, I think there might be a degree of natural immunity coming through, and if we look at lions like the tailless Salala lioness and the Matimba males, now they are now getting on in terms of age, and they're not showing any negative signs, and normally it really comes to the fore. Oh, she's going to roar. It's a very half-hearted roar. Sorry, as we were saying about the TB, so I think there's a lot of immunity, and that's not uncommon with diseases in wild animals. They really affect the population negatively for a short while. Now, this is not sort of chronic diseases like distemper and rabies. Those are different type of disease. These more slow acting diseases, and that gives the chance for the animal's body to actually produce antibodies and whatnot. And it's very similar with human beings and for example, the common cold. The common cold wiped out millions when it first jumped across from birds. Now it just makes us feel a bit snotty and miserable for a few days. I think to a degree, since the first recorded case of feline tuberculosis, there has been a building up a natural immunity to the disease. It'll be very interesting when that research paper comes out. Now, in terms of Oh, look at that, the wind in his mane. I hope you guys are catching that. Isn't that just stunning? The windswept lion. Said I think this is a false estrus this young female is showing, but because there is those scent of those hormones that male lion will pick up through his Jacobson's organ, and I know Jamie was just talking about the phlegm grimace, so that's how they draw the scent over that organ. So there will be scent, sort of those hormones that he's picking up on that might lead him to believe it's a full estrus, and he's not going to let her go till that sort of false estrus stops, and he'll keep following her about. And if anyone's just stumbled across a possum, that's an interesting word, but it's because I'm cold, I think. We are sitting live in the African bush next to a pair of lions. And they are behaving like a mating pair, although there's some pseudo-mating going on. And if you're wondering anything about this, it looks like some pseudo-mating about to take place. See, now here she's coming to initiate. See, she's not quite ready yet. See, now that's lion flirting. She whacks her tail to and fro in front of his face. It's very, very classic lion, big cat flirting techniques. Just a flirt. Let's just move forward a little bit. As I was saying, if you're wondering about this really interesting behavior that's happening around us, you're more than welcome to pop me a question about it, and you can do that by using the hashtag Safari Live on Twitter. And yes, we are live, and if you don't believe me, send me a question. Is that okay, Jean-Jacques? Oh, she's doing contact calls directly towards us. Very low. Hopefully she does a full roar. Now, the other reason I think this is a false estrus, the fact that she's contact calling for the other lionesses in her pride, it would be not impossible, but unusual if she was in full estrus and wanting to mate. Very pretty young girl, just over 3 years old now. Those lion's eyes or something. Oh, hello. The lion does that, lifting their nose to the oncoming wind. She might even smell those buffalo from here. We're not very far from the buffalo, probably about 900 meters, a kilometer. Now, hopefully the rest of her pride come and find those buffalo. Almost looks like she's thinking, how do I get rid of this dude? Oh dear. Every time I move, he lifts his head. Oh, she might jump up and stretch a bit. Right. Now, you'll see that with a lot of animals, as she's turned over the soil there to urinate in. Now, the reason for this is that that scent will last a little bit longer on slightly damp soil that's not on the surface. Oh boy. Oh, you can see every time she moves, he's right there. Now, this is difficult to block, but we will try to stay with them. Going to stay with it for a few more seconds. I think she might. It looks like he's about to try and mount. I'm just going to get around ahead of them. Watch them for a second, see what she does. Now, Janet's wondering how long does this flirting go on for? In this case, if it's a false estrus, Janet, it'll go on for till she's finished the cycle, which will probably be about 7 or 8 days. And they don't have a set mating season. Oh, they're going to snooze again. They don't have a set mating season. They'll mate throughout the year, just depending on when they got cubs. The only time a lioness is not going to mate is when she's currently caring for young. So they've moved into a little bit of a tricky spot, well, to see the male at least. So we're going to reposition now, and if we have a quick look, let me just try to roll back a bit. If we have a quick look at that male's head, now you can see how big it is, and there's a whole bunch of muscles and sinew and tendons that enable him to have incredible power in those jaws. And I'm sure James is going to tell you lots about it.
Now, those lions, of course, which are attempting very poorly, in my opinion, to mate, are an interesting case because she's just urinated there, and it's quite likely that the male lion will then go and smell her urine. Now, we often discuss this thing that mammals do called phlegmon, where they sort of lift up their top lips like that. It looks completely ridiculous. It looks even more ridiculous when I do it. But what they're doing is opening up this tract here. Now you see these two holes in the palate, which you don't have, but snakes have them, and these lions obviously have them. They open up their tract, and just inside there is an organ, which of course has long since rotted away. I'll just turn around and you can see where the organ would be placed. It would sit just in those two grooves there. See that? Now, in those two grooves is the vomeronasal organ, or the organ of Jacobson. And what that does is to pick up any pheromones that there might be in the urine. And those pheromones, of course, will tell this lioness, this male lion, whether the lioness whose urine he's just smelled is ready to mate. It'll tell him whether or not the correct pheromones are there for her to be in estrus, whether she's ovulating or not, or about to ovulate, and that will, of course, then stimulate him to try and mount her, which is exactly what's going on there. And as Brent says, probably some kind of proto-estrus, not quite in the right state yet to mate. So what happens then is that from there is an olfactory nerve, or a smelling nerve basically, that sends a signal up into this tiny little brain case back here. And in that brain case, I think it's in the hypothalamus, which is that, I think, in that part of the brain, I'm going to check that up for you, the brain will interpret whether or not the female is ready to mate or not. Let me just move those out of the way. And the way it does that, I find amazing, is that these are formera, they're called, and they're these holes all over the skull. You can see these holes here. These have not been dug by insects or anything like that. These are holes through which blood vessels and nerves specifically will move. And of course, every nerve in the body eventually must end up in the brain. So throughout the entire, that vastness of a lion's body, all these nerves are connected to this tiny little, Jamie said tennis ball sized brain. I think it's smaller than that. I think it's about 3/4 the size of a tennis ball. And so it connects up here. If you look in there, you can see a whole lot of sort of passages. Let me shine in there for you. You can see a whole lot of passages through which nerves and blood vessels will go to the brain from the nose. And I think that's an absolutely amazing thing. So that's the vomeronasal organ, and let's just go and see right now if that male isn't going to exhibit phlegm.
Look how she's testing the air. Now, the buffalo are in that direction. And of course, their sense of smell is infinitely better than ours. So she could also be smelling something else that we don't even know about. I'd say she's smelling a little bit further to the south than where the buffalo, now she's turned towards the buffalo. I love it when they do that, just lifting their nose to the wind. She's starting to look a little bit restless. Maybe a nice yawn. Ah, on cue, madam, on cue. Standing by. Sorry, I'm just on the game drive radio for a second. In the middle of quarantine, Lingala Mobile North. Okay. On the move now, let's try it. Find a way through here. Can you see them still? Oh no. Oh, they're playing quite nicely. I'm just trying to get us in the right spot. But she's jumping around and he's chasing her. Oh. Watch the thorns, Andre. So they're moving parallel to us at the moment. This is a bit of a tricky area, so I think I'm going to try just get ahead of them again. While we do that, let's go see what Jamie's up to.
Well, I was originally going to head back towards those buffalo to see if they were, well, basically to be there in case the lions decided to go hunting south. However, it sounds as though they're heading to the north, which means that we will continue on our original route, checking the western side of Djuma. And I find myself in a somewhat interesting position in that the light that is casting its gentle glow upon the front of the Mahindra is very high up, right up near the antenna. So I have to be very careful whenever I go underneath a tree, in case I knock it off. I don't think I would be terribly popular with either the cameraman or the tech department if I were to do that.
Considering it's brand new.
Especially apparently considering it's brand new, according to VM. So I'll do my absolute utmost not to smash the light. Do my best. Try and pick a route where there's no trees in the road. It isn't terribly easy at the moment with the elephants wandering about. So we were, speaking of which, we need to do a quick navigation here. We were talking about Maggie the makeshift Mahindra. This always requires a bit more maneuvering. So Sandy in Florida, I hope that you are still watching, that you can have the answer to your question, which is that We actually have two Mahindras. Well, no. We have one Mahindra that we usually use, and we have a second Mahindra that we have borrowed given the current situation with Jigger and Wendy. Now this Mahindra, the nameless Mahindra that's been compared to a boat and occasionally called the Titanic, has been set up essentially like Jigger or Wendy used to be. So there's a whole seating, we've taken the seats right off the usual safari seats that sit there. We've got a nice seating arrangement happening here, and all of the equipment from Wendy is now sitting on this Mahindra. The previous Mahindra was the one that I named yesterday. I do hope you're taking notes because this could get confusing. The previous Mahindra was the one we were temporarily using by strapping the bushwalk backpack, which you might have seen the cameraman carry a big heavy backpack with an antenna that sticks up at the back, and that allows us to bring you live walks from the bush. Whew, this is terrifying. I feel so much pressure not to smash this light. So that's what we were temporarily making use of, and that was the Mahindra that I nicknamed Maggie. I don't know why Maggie. Maggie was just the name that came to mind as I said makeshift Mahindra. It kind of flowed off the Maggie, the makeshift Mahindra. Just worked perfectly. So I actually wasn't met with much in the way of opposition when I put forward that name yesterday evening. I'm not entirely sure if that was because people didn't object to my name or if actually nobody was really listening, which occasionally happens in a camp with lots of personalities in it. Either way, it's become Maggie the makeshift Mahindra, and that is the way that she will stay. And since I haven't been able to go and stake out the buffalo on quarantine, let's go back to James, who has them wandering about.
Well, I don't know that we've seen the buffalo so much as the buffalo have come to see us. You can see them grazing across quarantine clearings there. I think Brent, when he was with them, was just the other side. And the lions are not too far from here. They're sufficiently far away for me not to be vaguely worried about them coming across here. But the buff are kind of grazing towards us, which is just so wonderful. It's the best kind of office to have out here. And as Jamie and Brent have told you already, of course, this kind of windy, blustery weather is not nice for them, and so they're going to spend as much time as they can here in the open. The lioness is calling. Let's go and look.
So it looked like she's still contact calling, and it looked like she was about to get restless again, which she did. What are you up to in that bush, madam? Looks like she might... Yeah. I can't use my headlights, I'm afraid, otherwise I'll blind the people in front of us. Well, she's just chewing on the branch, I think more out of sheer frustration than anything else. Definitely showing signs that she wants to get moving, and definitely probably trying to get rid of this male. Oh, isn't this just beautiful? There's a contact call again. Disdainful look over the shoulder at the male. We are getting a bit louder. Check, man. Oh, there we go. Wasn't that incredible? She went and sniffed the back of Aubrey's car, and as she moves, he moves. Oh, there we go. Aub's there. Fuck up, I got right behind you. See, it's not proper mating. There's nowhere near the amount of normal aggression you would see, and she doesn't look very uncomfortable. Shame. Okay. We're getting a bit trapped where we are. It's very thick around here, lots of dead trees and the light's failing. So I think if it had been proper mating, you would have also seen, as soon as he had finished, she would have rolled onto her back to try make sure that none of the semen came out. And it's very typical behavior for proper mating, and we're not seeing that. She's not rolling over, and so I think this could be a little bit of a farce, a false estrus. Try and move. Are we looking behind us? Oh dear, where to go now? That is the question. We'll try stick with them as long as we can. But this is a particularly thick and... Oh, they've changed direction again. Huh. Giving my arms a workout. Ginny's wondering, do male lions roar louder than a lioness? They do, Ginny, and that's just a fact of them being bigger and having a larger lung capacity. And let's see, am I going to be able to get over this one? Hold on. Oh, that wasn't too bad after all. Hello. I'm going to try to stick with them as much as we can. Last place I saw them was just disappearing in front of me here. Turn on all our searchlights. I think they headed back down towards the road. Just have a quick look on the road. Ah, there they are. Okay, I'm just going to try and get up ahead of them. They've just gone through there. I'm just trying to see if there's a spot. Oh, there she is. She's gone onto the high ground on top of a termite mound. Oh, good place to lie down. Yeah, well, if she's lying down, that gives me a chance to try and get into a better spot to view her. So while we maneuver through here, hi Kathy. Kathy's in Tennessee, and she says she knows these lions aren't collared, but are their movements recorded for research purposes? They are. Kathy, every time we see them, and the other lodges around see them, they are uploaded into a system, and that data is collected by Panthera, and it is one of the longest ongoing predator projects in South Africa. I'm just going to move a little bit further forward here so Aubrey's got some space to come in as well. Oh, isn't that pretty? She's looking down at us. Sorry about the awkward angle, Jandre. Isn't that just beautiful? Sorry, just taking a moment to enjoy that spectacular scene. Look at her sniffing the air. No, I didn't quite catch the name because the Game Drive channel was going at the same time. I think it was maybe Kathy. I'm not sure. No, it wasn't Kathy. Corrine was saying, well, how long do coalitions or prides normally last for? And if one or more members die, will they find another group? So with prides, the female pride, the female dynasty, normally lasts a lot longer than a male dynasty. So because it's made up of all related females that carry similar genetic code. So that will generally can last for 50, 100 years even, the single genetic dynasty of a female pride. Males generally 4 to 5 years at the most. Oh, I hope you guys are getting some screenshots. Just gorgeous, gorgeous lights. Oh, look at the yawn. Big toofies. So as I was saying, Karine, now the male dynasties don't last nearly as long as the female dynasties. But of course, the genetics of those males is passed down through the females. So it's very important that sort of the genetic history, the genetic code, the genetic strength in lions is held within the females. Because over their lifetime, most females will probably mate with multiple coalitions or multiple males from different genetic lines, which is the opposite to leopards. With leopards, the genetic strength is held in the males, and that's why female leopards are... Oh, there we go. That was a very half-hearted roar. It's going, guys, where are you? Off down her mountain she goes. So as I was saying, Queen, so one of the very interesting things, so the genetic sort of lineage and the strength of that genetic lineage in lions is held in the females. Leopards, it's held in the males. So a group of female lions will generally mate with multiple coalitions over the time that they're alive. Now, they tend to put more effort into looking after lionesses. So they try to chase away young males at an earlier age, but we can continue this conversation shortly. Let's go to Jamie and a ball of cuteness.
He's gonna go. Ah, he's still there. Phew! I thought he was gonna disappear before you had a chance to see. The bush what else would be cute? Oh, yeah, taking ourselves down a dangerous road here, VM. What would be in the cute 5?
Lions, leopards.
Baby lions and baby leopards, I guess.
Normal lions.
Or just normal ones. You think they fall under the cute 5? VM is suggesting that they fall under the cute 5. I was thinking along the lines of something like a Scops owl, maybe, or a either way, obviously. To try to get out those incredibly large eyes, searching for any sign of movement. Ooh. A long fluffy tail to help to balance it. Oh, hold on, little bush baby. Just as though it's about to be blown up. Incredible. Gone. Fate a little bit, and bush baby gone. Hopping off into the distance in search of moths and michies and other such things. A michie, I think a michie is entirely a South African word. Kind of refers to that's be.
Like they might head north. There's the male there, lying up on the side of the road. Lioness is staring towards the west. Now that's where the rest of the pride were last seen this morning. Then prey species, although it looks like she's completely ignoring the food. Just gonna, there we go, she's walking straight towards us. That's good, back towards the buffalo. Right. Okay. This is a good sign. They're heading back towards quarantine. We know there's a big herd of buffalo there. Maybe we're in for some excitement tonight. And not have a car accident. Yeah, we're just waiting for Aubrey to go. We don't want to have a car accident while following lions. Now, believe it or not, that has happened to me once before. So they are busy now mobile directly down Gallagher shortcut towards quarantine. And she suddenly just seemed to have a little bit more purpose as she turned around and came past us. See them there just in front of Aubrey's vehicle. Thanks, Orbs. So when there's two of us on a small road like this, we take turns in front. As I said, finding and keeping up with animals is a team game. We always just try to drive to the side so everyone can see just past. Oh, it looks like he's going to stop for a little scent mark on that bush. Oh, this is definitely the most purpose we've seen them walking with so far this evening. They've sort of been meandering around, and I'm really wondering, are they going to head for those buffalo? Or are they going to head to try and catch James in the tent? I think the buffalo would make a, thanks for, I think James would make a far better a meal. I'm sorry, other way around. I think the buffalo would make a far better meal than James. There's Fleming grimacing. Don't you love those long shadows created on the road there? Oh, a little bit more flirting. Look at those tail flicks. And lions being lions, they do have this knack of being highly mobile for short periods and then slowing it all down again. One must remember they do sleep for about 20 out of 24 hours, and even that 4 hours of movement isn't constant movement. Oh, looks like there's going to be some pseudo mating. Now see what I've been talking about, it's not typical mating behavior. She hasn't rolled over, she doesn't look like she's in any discomfort from the mating. So as I think she's going through false estrus at the moment. Yeah, jumping around, I think she's actually looking for the other lionesses more than anything else. And if she does go back into this thicket here, I don't think I'm going to risk in this really dark weather trying to follow off-road there. The only thing we'll probably do is end up in a hole, a big one. There goes the male, and they're heading back into there. So as they move off there, Romy from Ohio's got a question. about will the male participate in any form of killing, or will he just sit back, wait for the lionesses to do the job, and then take his share? Well, he will, especially with larger prey like buffalo, giraffe, hippo. They will definitely play active parts in the hunting. Even with smaller stuff, if they happen to be around, they will be there. But normally when they are taking the lion's share, so to speak, it's on the smaller stuff that they've happened to bump into or smelt, heard the kill. They'll rush in and steal it. But on big animals like buffalo, they're very, very, very important, especially if there was only a lioness and a male. Her by herself, a buffalo might be a bit of a push, but with him, there's a very good chance that they can take one down. He is massively strong, much, much stronger than the female. And put it this way, if a female lioness, if a lioness had to swat you, she would break your neck just by hitting you. If a male lion had to swat you, he's so strong that without any cutting blade or whatnot, the pure blunt force would remove your head from your shoulders. And that's how strong a male lion is. But we're going to continue, see what else we can find in the dark. I'm not going to follow those lions into that thicket in this darkness, but let's go see what James is up to.
Well, Brent, clearly you haven't linked to James, you have linked to Jamie, but to be fair, of all of the names in the world, ours do sound relatively similar. And you know, I've been strapped once or twice as James, so it's all good. I know Brent has decided to leave those lions to go wandering into the darkness. We're in the process of making our way towards quarantine. You have to go through it at some point, which means that we could lose you, but so far we seem to be fine. I went and double-checked Sandy Patch Road to see if we couldn't find our jackal couple that appears to have moved in around there at Impala Plains. They didn't show themselves this evening, but I am hopeful for the future that they will be around and about. This weather is getting colder and colder. The wind is howling. The temperature has dropped considerably since we started out this afternoon. And I think tomorrow morning we're going to be wrapping up with as many blankets and hot water bottles and cups of coffee as we can possibly manage to keep ourselves warm. Liam's already wrapped up in a very cozy looking blanket. And I don't blame him because the wind chill factor is quite impressive right now. And somebody's probably going to have to unfold my fingers from the spotlight when it comes time to go home, because they're going to be stuck there, frozen in one position. Oh, just by the way, for those of you who are more familiar with our elephant characters, oh dear, we appear to be about to bump into somebody. Let's just eke our way forward. Are you actually leaving the line? Sighting, I guess. I didn't realize it was far north. Well, we'll just let them carry on. However, because our signal is getting shaky, over to James in the tent.
Now, one of the great joys, of course, of being in the tent is that I get to listen to my own voice, which I should have turned off long ago. Okay, there we go. One of the great joys of being in the tent is that I'm able to sit here and watch what's going on and then study what people are seeing. Now, because Jamie has seen nothing, I'm going to have to show you something that I found. And I think this is quite interesting. There's a lot of wind blowing stuff all over the place. What it is an uthika. Can you all say uthika? That's a good word to say on a Saturday evening, uthika. An uthika is like an egg sac. And it's an egg sac made for a praying mantis. Now the praying mantis, what she does is she creates this sort of ball of eggs and then this protein sac around the ball of eggs, which will then protect them, and it will harden in the sun and protect the eggs until they hatch. Now you can see maybe that there are holes all over the uthika, and that's because it's pretty hollow inside. There are no eggs in it anymore. And what the little mantids do is that they drill their way out and then they hang on a little piece of silk and then they fly off in the wind. probably and then onto the ground, and they go about their lives. And of course different mantises have different lives. I think this was probably a pretty big mantis that laid this one. Some of them are tiny, sort of maybe 1/4 of an inch long, and others much bigger, maybe up to 6 inches in length. But they all make these little oothekas which look after the eggs, and nothing can eat the eggs, of course. Now I'm going to have a quick look under the microscope and see what it looks like. I'll just try and, there we go, that's quite a nice picture there that you can see. And you can see the hole out of which the little ones came, the little mantid instars, and then they flew off. Now a mantis is what I described earlier. Remember I described a heterometabolic life cycle where there's no larval stage. They go through a number of instar stages. In other words, the youngsters look just like the adults. So just miniature versions of the adults will come out of this incredibly complicated mass of protein, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, is not sort of spun. No, it might actually be spun. Let's just open it up a bit. It doesn't, I mean, as far as I understand, it isn't spun like a cocoon is spun. I thought it was just sort of secreted and then hardened, but it does look like it's quite fibrous. This is amazing. I've never done this before. There we go. Oh, there is some things inside there. That's interesting. You know what? Something came in here to live. After the mantids had gone, something hopped in here to live, and that looks like the exoskeleton of a beetle of some sort. Isn't that interesting? So absolutely everything out here is used. Now let's just have a quick look at the fibers underneath the microscope. Now ideally, I mean, of course, once we really are sorted out, this microscope will have its own feed, so Gert won't be forced to sort of go zoom into the computer screen like that. But look at the fibers. Incredibly complex. Now that's all very complicated protein, of course, which very little is able to digest, the special kind of protein, which means that if a predator comes across an ootheca like this, it's going to be reticent to try and eat it. Now what I just want you to have a quick look at is how black it is outside. And if you look just, yeah, there, you can see that spot. Can you see that spot of light? There we go. That's Brent Leo Smith. He's lurking just the other side of quarantine clearings. The buffalo were out sort of that away. We're not going to be able to see them. Those lions, I think, are heading this way. So we're obviously very careful as to how we're going to get home. Hopefully someone will come and fetch us and we won't have to spend the night here terrifying and shivering for the fear of butterfly. And Rebecca says, no one's coming to fetch me. I live in this tent now. Then the other thing I wanted to show you was this delicious, delicious smelling stuff. Now, I've always known this as something called ocimum or wild aniseed or wild basil, because you get two different species of it. And it's not particularly attractive at this time of the year, but the smell is just magnificent. This is the wild basil version. It's not the aniseed version. And it makes kind of indistinct purplish, pinkish flowers at some stages of the year, but they've died out now. But you will smell this throughout the year. Isn't that lovely? And the smell, what you should do, I mean, it is exactly like wild basil. If you go and get some fresh basil, maybe you have some in your fridge, or maybe you have some at a fresh produce market near you. Go and buy some, crush it up, and smell it. And it's the most comforting, homely smell, especially after you've been handling sort of carcasses and dead skulls, as you can see behind me there. This is an excellent way to kind of finish up the evening with a very pleasant smell. Very nice indeed. We're going to place that in here. And in here, of course, is Geraldine's very conveniently labelled bottle. You see there, grass. That's Geraldine, who's doing a lot of our producing for us. She said, can I decorate your tent for you? I said, I don't want anything in the tent that is not usable. So she said, well, you can use grass in various segments, can't you? So I said, yes, okay, you can put some grass in a jar if you'd very much like to. I'm just trying to think what else to show you here while Brent and Jamie get into some form of position to show you an animal. Here's something quite interesting, actually. Now, I've shown you the tortoises and stuff before, and what I can show you here is the difference between a tortoise and a terrapin shell. Isn't that interesting? No, I'm talking absolute rubbish. You know what? I've just realized what this is. This is the head of a catfish. This is the head of a really enormous catfish. And that's the skull. Let's just open it up because it's not really a great it's not a great example. So let's just open it up. Here is Brent, everybody.
I'm convinced he's got
Hello,
a heater
Brent.
in here.
No, there's no heater, but if you come and stand in front of this light here, you'll be able to warm your face.
I knew there was some form of warming thing in here, because it's not warm out there at all. I just thought,
Sorry about that. Yeah, we've had a very tough time here.
I'm surprised you don't have a little fire going.
No, we didn't, because the wind was blowing
Oh,
and
that
it
is-
blown
that is
smoke in
true.
our eyes, you
That
know.
is true.
Yes.
I'm glad you were nice and toasty in here.
Thank
I'm going
you.
to go be cold again for the rest
Okay,
of the night. Bye.
enjoy it. That was a nice surprise. Okay, so that's a catfish skull, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with this tortoise shell, and so I'm going to put the tortoise shell back now. Okay, one last thing, because I'm not sure how long you're going to be with me. Let's have a look here. Just remember we talked about this old hyena and how it's got such a flat bunch of teeth. Only the hyena is able to do this to a bone. See that bone? Only a hyena has the teeth capable of doing that, and you'll see the difference between this. In fact, let me show this to you quickly. This is I definitely haven't shown you before. Here's the leopard, and here's the hyena. Now, although this was a very old hyena, you'll notice how the premolars, these are the premolars here, the premolars in the leopard are sharp, just like they are on your dogs. So if you find it, you go and grab your house cat or your dog and open their mouths and tell them not to bite you, and just feel the premolars. The premolars there are very sharp, but on the hyena, this is not simply because it's old, they're chiseled. And they're chiseled because it helps them then to break open these bones. A dog wouldn't be able to do that, they'd snap the edge of the teeth off eventually, but on the hyena, it is imminently possible with these flattened, chisel-like molars and premolars, which I think is fantastic. Everybody, it's been a lovely afternoon in the tent, probably more pleasant than it has been out there, but at least you've had those incredible lions. So we're going to hand you back to, looks like, Jamie for the last little while, and then I'm sure you'll say goodbye to Brent too. So stay safe and happy wherever you are. We'll see you tomorrow morning, hopefully not too blustery, at 6 o'clock. Until then, bye-bye.
And so we come to the end of our sunset safari. Another marvelous afternoon, even if it was somewhat chilly, and we found ourselves approaching the tent as well. We figured we'd have a little bit of a meeting, but it seems as though Brent didn't get that memo and has disappeared off. That's okay. We'll let him start heading back to wrap up nice and warm. There we go. I nearly missed the turn, actually. And in fact, we might catch them in the process of packing everything up. No, they're done. They're gone. Wow, that was fast. Oh, apparently James is still in the tent. Well, that's a relief. He can say farewell to him here. James, do you want to do an additional farewell? I don't think he can hear me. Look at it billowing. There's Eugene. Oh, well. Well, so much for that idea. We come to the end. I'm just going to go and say a quick thank you to Viam and to Herbert for joining us on the back this afternoon, and to Rebecca and Lou in final control. Most importantly, a big thank you to all of you. We will catch you tomorrow morning on the Sunrise Safari. In the meantime, we're going to go and wrap ourselves up nice and warm and prepare for the chill that lies ahead. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a wonderful day.